All right, we have a roll.
Everyone is present. Eric is online. Virtual.
Yeah, we communicated with Chris.
I'm just checking with him.
Good, thank you. Okay, we will go to.
He says he's trying to log in.
Okay, minutes of December 17th, they were distributed. Jerry did a great job taking me off of the video. I will entertain a motion for, there's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Any changes, comments before that? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you very much. And we're on to public comment. Anybody in the room have anything to say? Let's see, yes, would you like to talk? You, feel free to raise your hand. Okay, if not, we'll continue to move forward, and Chris, welcome, you have made it just in time. And, good to have you. I'm sorry you're not feeling well, but glad you are on the screen rather than in the room. And,
Can you hear me okay?
very well.
Okay.
Let me set the stage for 1 second, and then we'll kick it off with the, ordinarily, just like with the Department of Police Services, we end up getting a budget kind of at the end of their process and not really seeing what the, where we are, some of the drivers getting a little bit what I would call a peek at the budget before it ultimately is approved. So with the Board of Education, this year, I'm trying the same idea, which is to see whether or not, prior to the board actually voting, which is going to be hopefully next Tuesday, be able to have the superintendent give us a bit of a, just an overview. What are the drivers, what's expected, if there's any kind of heads up that we need to have a heads up, and so.
Are you ready for me?
All right.
Okay, well, thank you. And I apologize that I have to do this remotely, but I think as you said, Bruce, you probably don't want me in the room with you all. So as much as superintendents don't like going through budget process, trust me, I would much rather be with you all tonight than doing this where I am. So I know we have the presentation that we presented to the Board of Education last week. That we had shared with the Board of Finance, and for time's sake, I won't take you through the whole thing. And I think the discussions we had were primarily a sort of a peek at where we are and what's driving it, so there are no surprises. So I don't have control of the, or maybe I do. I don't believe.
You do not.
No, you do not.
Okay. So why don't I know that all of the Board of Finance members got the presentation in advance. If it's okay with you all, I have a separate monitor here that I can go off of, unless you want me to put up on the screen, and whoever's driving feel free. But I think the most important thing to start with, obviously me being new to the district and you guys having so much consistency over the last several years, that and also I see Pam's in the room, to thank Pam. This is our first go at it in our current roles. And we had made a commitment to the board that we weren't going to change anything procedurally when it came to the budget this particular year. So we were going to follow the same process that the Board of Finance, and that the town and the community was used to. So if you did have it in front of you, I would jump ahead to the 9th slide that we presented to the board. Oh, you do have it. Great. I'm guessing Pam is driving.
Nope.
There is.
Oh.
We can have.
It's the first time Pam hasn't bailed me out. And there's obviously more information in there as far as what we've accomplished over the past year, where the town's funding has gone to. But jumping into where it says budget development, that's where I was going to just start for this evening. There we go. And essentially that's the same process that the community is used to. We really started this process essentially over the summer. with anything that we know that we can identify for things to be prepared for going into the budget development process and the budget workshops that we held with staff. And really, it's kind of out of order, but I didn't change anything from last year. But next year, we're going to move some of these little bullet points over. And essentially, we start at the bottom where we discuss with the practitioners in our schools. And what we did was we spoke with, and starting from not just the district leadership level, but the instructional leadership teams, and really meeting with teachers and finding out what is it that their needs are in their buildings, in their classrooms, to make sure that we're meeting the obligations that we have for our students. That's the first and foremost. When I shared with the board last week, and our administrators were in that meeting, the first time I ever met the district leadership team, I shared with them that I'll always support you. But if you ask me for something to support, just be prepared to answer one question. And how is that good? Whatever you're asking me for, how is that good for students? And if it is, I'll support you. And if you don't have an answer for you, I probably will send you back to get an answer for it. So that's where we started. Obviously, the district is very much tied to our 5-year strategic plan, which I think is a good segue into we are in year 4 of that plan. So the process of developing the next plan, because this one expires in 2026, is underway as well. So not just planning for 1 year in advance, but we really have to look at what's going to mold and shape this district for the long term, not just over the next fiscal year. We have to review our enrollment projections and look at what our sustained services budget would be. And then at that point, we start trying to identify cost-saving opportunities that we may see that don't have an impact on programming, but can also ultimately have a cost-saving opportunity for us as a district and ultimately for the town. So moving on to the considerations that we took when we built this budget, is we started like we do every year with a zero-based budget. And we start with zero and we build from there. I know it's kind of an oxymoron sometimes in my line of work when we talk about fiscal responsibility, but we have an obligation to ask for what we need and ask for what we need to enhance the programming for our kids, to not just ask for things that are wish lists and things that we think we want, but we have an obligation to the taxpayers as well. We understand we all live out of the same purse, whether it be the town or the schools, and that's something that I'm used to doing in my career. So we do have an eye on our fiscal responsibility for it. The middle one is important, the changing emotional needs and models of instruction for our children. Our kids have changed. A lot of you have experienced things with your own families, and we're not immune to it. The kids that are coming into our schools now are a lot different than they were coming in just 5 years ago. Case in point, what I'm doing now was not a reality 5 years ago, and it is now, and that's the world that our kids live in. Legislative mandates, that's one of my least favorite topics, and I'm sure it is for most of you in the room. There's a lot of things that we're required to do that we don't necessarily have a say in, but it's the law, and we have to abide by the law. So you'll see on the bottom, there's something called science of reading. That's a perfect example of a legislative mandate that the state determined that every school district had to use one of 6 reading programs in their elementary schools. Coincidentally, the one that we were currently using was not on the list of 6. So there was a significant financial investment that the district needed to make in order to be compliant with the new legislation. There's ongoing HVAC requirements, which you're all well aware of. That first time I met you, I think we talked about some HVAC projects. We have a brand new, again, it kind of falls under the legislative mandates, but we have a new teacher evaluation process that's legally binding, that we work in conjunction with our bargaining units and our administrators on how we evaluate teachers, but the process is all dictated by a legislative change. We constantly have issues when it comes to maintaining our facilities. And the last 2 that are on there, I think it's important for you all to hear from me as being somewhat new and objective. Although our buildings and our infrastructure could be a bit dated, I have to say that they are incredibly well maintained. You would not know that you're walking through buildings that were built in the 50s and 60s at times because of the way and the pride that our staff takes in maintaining them. But as you all know, keeping our buildings up and running and maintained, there is a cost to that. And that's all incorporated in what the budget ultimately is that we have submitted to the Board of Education. Moving on, I'll get to the thing you're all probably wondering of, the little bit of an enrollment data. You're all aware, there's been a decrease in enrollment in the community over the last several years. This is all based on October 1. What I can share with you, and although it's not legal and official because the state only recognizes our enrollment as October 1, so this current year we're flat from last year. But if you look at our enrollment present day, we're actually up Although it's not a lot of kids, it's about 8 or 9 kids that are above what we were at October 1. And we have to prepare that that may be a little bit of a shift change. Although I don't see us, going to 2,000 kids anytime soon, our enrollment isn't decreasing as much. We are seeing more children move to the community that I've just witnessed in my brief period of time here. So on record, we are about even. We're going to end up at the rest of the year a little bit higher, I believe, than where we started. Moving on, just to give a little peek as to what makes up our population of students. One of the things that the state designates is a student that's qualified as having high needs. And to be considered high need, you have to have, and that was on the previous slide, I apologize, where we broke out that the historical enrollment data by kids who either qualify for special education, who are a free or reduced lunch, or are a multi-language learner, meaning English isn't their primary language at home. If you take those three categories and look at the population of the Old Saybrook Public Schools, about 40% of our kids are considered high needs in the eyes of the state. That isn't Chris making up a number or Chris making up a category. That's how the state designates our kids. And when we get into performance measures, you will see that differentiated on how we report out our academic data based on our all students versus our students with high needs. What does that mean? Essentially, what that means is the higher needs that your children have, the more resources that you're going to need to meet those needs, essentially. And we've particularly talked about the drastic increase that we've seen in students coming to district who are considered multi-language learners, meaning English is not their primary language. And I know you guys aren't the Board of Education, but this is something that I have an annual conversation with boards of. Just as a reminder, when a student comes into our schools and they don't speak English and they come from another country, we have 1 year to get that student proficient in English, because the second year they're tested just like a student who was born and raised in Old Saybrook was. So that obviously does cause a bit of concern for us as far as ensuring that we have the resources to meet the needs of that child. I guess the one that you really want to, and I'll kind of start and end there. If you move on to the next slide, that's where we are in present day when it comes to the budget requests that we submitted. So you could see the sustained services budget was a little over 5% at 5.2 or $1.5 million increase. When we went through the process, our administrators presented us a budget that was just about 5%. And through some pencil sharpening and some economies of scale, we were able to get that number down to 3.76, which is ultimately what we had presented to the Board of Education. That doesn't include anything new. That essentially keeps what we currently have, including the staffing levels that we currently have. The reason that a lot of this is a little bit unique, and I'm feeling a little bit, not feeling better about it, but typically when superintendents start sharing information publicly about where their budgets come in, you'll see a couple of underliers that are above 5%, 6, 7, 8%, but the vast majority are coming in that 2 to 3, 4% range. This is the first year in my nearly 20 years of doing this that I am seeing more 6s and 7s than I am seeing 2s and 3s. And that's not to be an alarmist, but as you start seeing things that I'm sure as they get reported in the media, you're going to start seeing a lot of districts that are faced with challenging fiscal concerns going into this next fiscal year, and we're not immune to that. If you move on, I could show you the history of the budgets that have been approved. And if you could see where we are for next year is a little bit higher than what was asked for in the past, but we've always been in that ballpark. And we try to keep a commitment to staying somewhere in a responsible area to maintain the services that we have without being too outlandish for folks to have to grasp with asking for things that we don't necessarily need. But that 3.76% is strictly just maintaining what we currently have. I don't know what happened in 23, 24, but I know that last year that was sort of the barometer that we were trying to get in that same area. Particularly being new in the role, I didn't want to come in and ask for something that people say, who's the new guy asking for a whole boatload of money? So I was very respectful of the process and respectful of what the community is used to. If you want to move on, I can show you what that's made up of. And as you can see, we're in the people business, and nearly and we'll get to the next one, almost 80% of what we do is tied up in salaries and benefits. We're going to probably reverse the colors because the green on the arrows here, It was recommended in the last presentation, sort of show it that's a negative, then the red is a positive. But you could see our salaries are up about 3%. And those are all contractual obligations. Unfortunately, the next one is the big one. Our benefits this year. Oh, I'm sorry, same one. But well, that's fine. We can go either way. I apologize. I'm not there, so I will roll with the punches. If you look at the second part of the graph where it says benefits, we had gone into this process in the summer anticipating an increase in health insurance about 10%. At our most recent meeting, our insurance consultant shared with us, we are self-insured. We're part of a cooperative agreement, and our claims experience is higher than it has been. So unfortunately, we are sitting at about 15% for our health insurance increase for next year alone. And as you can see by the numbers, when you break down health insurance, that's nearly $300,000 above the 10% that we had already sort of earmarked as what we anticipated that increase to be. So when some board members asked, were there new things that we wanted to do or that we actually need because the changing dynamics of our students, the answer was yes. The unfortunate reality was we got hit with an additional $300,000 plus expense very late in the process that we weren't anticipating. Now, we won't know that final number until well into the spring. We hope that their experience will come down and that that number won't be as high as what we anticipated as being now. Unfortunately, we live in a world where we have to submit our numbers before these things are finalized, and we can't run the risk that if the consultant is right and is saying that's what it's going to be, then we shortchange the health insurance account. And particularly since we're self-insured and we pay our own claims, that's something that we unfortunately have to keep in the budget at this point. So that really dictated a lot of where this presentation was going and where it ultimately ended up. And just quickly, if you look at tuition, that's tuition that we pay out to other districts, particularly for special education. So our special education department's done a great job of trying to take students that are outplaced in other districts or other programs and bring them back home. And you can see that that's tuition that we don't send out. And then the last is transportation. Although we have a contracted increase that's more than the 1.3%, because of those coinciding special education students and the transportation that accommodates them has gone down, we are seeing a bit less of an increase in transportation next year than we would just based on the contractual increase. I'm also being cognizant of time, Bruce, so I've got 2 more minutes before I told you I will stop for questions. Unless you want to cut me off, feel free. I did.
You're doing great.
Just moving on, and this part will be really quick if you want to move to the next one. This is our teacher's contract, and you could just see, we're in the blue, the orange is the state average. Our contract outperformed the state increase during the last cycle at 12%. We came in a little lower than that. You can see in the first 2 years, we were lower than the state. In this next fiscal year, we're going to be a bit higher. That is not uncommon when you get a deal that's lower than the state average. So we are due that contract negotiation with our teachers union starts up again this summer. So we are locked in for next year, but obviously going forward, that is yet to be determined. Moving on, I think this is important for the community to know. We currently have 139.05 FTEs. Those are certified teaching positions in the district. This budget maintains all of them. That was very important to me. I did not want to decrease any teaching positions because quite frankly, the need is there. Now, that doesn't mean that people may all be in the same roles. That depends on enrollment and class offerings and things like that. But we obviously work with our staff to do that. But we do have the need, I think, from a staffing perspective, where we should be, maybe a little short, to be honest. But in this particular case, it was important to make sure that we maintain our current staff and certified staff levels. I'm going to talk really fast. Moving on, I'm sure you're all interested in the next slide, but we're basically in the middle of area towns. A lot of it's dictated on the size of the district. You can see Westport's per pupil expenditure is a bit higher than ours, but they have less students. Essex and Deep River, that's a regional school district, so that's a little weird one to compare ourselves to because within their elementary schools, there's multiple boards. But if you look at us compared to, say, a Clinton, or you look at us compared to Lime Old Lyme, we're a little bit higher, but we're still in that ballpark because our enrollment's a little bit lower. Moving on, I talked about health insurance. I promised Pam I would take the hit for this one. I made her do the last one. This is our historical trend in health insurance. So you could see we've outperformed the state. So the option for most districts in the state, especially smaller districts, or you can either be in the cooperative plan as we are, you can be on your own, which is not attainable in a district our size, or you would join the state plan. So this is how our cooperative plan has performed versus the state plan. And you can see even though our numbers are a little bit higher this year, historically, we have outperformed the state plan. To make that a little bit more specific, if you move on to the next slide, this is what we actually pay per month for rates. So if you compare us in the blue to what the cost of the actual plan is, even at a 15% increase for a family plan next year, we are still paying substantially less for that plan than had we gone to the state partnership plan. So that comes up every now and then. People say, well, why don't you go to the state plan? The state plan is more expensive than our current plan. The reality is a lot of superintendents I've spoken with over the last week have said that their large budget request increase, unfortunately, they're all being driven by health insurance rates. The health insurance marketplace has gone a little bit haywire this past year. So although we had a bit of sticker shock as I'm talking to friends and colleagues, I'm actually feeling much better about our position than I know some colleagues who are in the 20-25% range for increases next year. So it's not great, but I guess it could be worse. I like to be an optimist. That said, I will really blow through the rest of this quick. The rest of our expenditures are listed out on here. And if anyone has specific questions, we can jump on. Our capital operation budget, which is next. Some of these shouldn't come as a surprise. As I mentioned earlier, we have some HVAC obligations. We have some equipment that we need to buy. And I'll just jump to the last of the anticipated grant funding. As you can see, the education cost sharing, that's the giant grant that you always hear about on the news about, historic rates of educational funding by the state of Connecticut. We get $131,000 in a $29 million budget. So we're not really relying on local taxpayers more so than we are on state funding. The special education for high cost students, or what's also known as the excess cost, it's to be determined in here. But usually that's the state's supposed to fund that 100%. They never have since the inception. We're getting word it's usually a percentage for any student that reaches that 4.5 times their per pupil expenditure. We would get reimbursed a percentage of that. As I said, the law says 100. They've never met 100. We're hearing numbers like 60% now. I think that $54,000 was based on 70%. It's going to be even lower going forward. And then the other federal grants are what we get from the federal government for our IDEA or for entitlement funding. Last is the anticipated grants. The next one, that was a lot of the COVID money and the ERPA and the ARP and ESSER money. As you can see, all that's basically gone, has to be expended by now. So we don't anticipate much in that area. So the rest of the potential for grant funding from the federal or state government is really minuscule at this point. I will end on the conclusion. This budget supports the district's strategic plan, which is a promise that the Board of Education has made to the community. It continues an investment in our facilities. It meets the legislative mandates that we have an obligation to meet. We believe it's as fiscally responsible as we can be. But it's also important to know that we are preparing for our next strategic plan. The goal that I set out for our administrative staff was bring me anything that increases access and opportunities for our kids, because we can't forget why we're here. Obviously, we have contractual obligations, and the changing demographics and accompanying the needs of our kids is what's at the forefront. So I leave you with that. The board has not adopted this yet, because this is a bit more fluid than what we had anticipated. And unfortunately, some of the increased costs offset some of the other things that I was going to request. The board has asked me for some more information, and they're going to have their budget discussion next Tuesday. So I don't know what will ultimately make it to you. It may be more than this, but the reason for that would be it didn't make my first cut because we got that sort of blindsided of an extra $300,000 for health insurance. Okay, Bruce, I think I talked longer than I told you I would.
That's right. You did great. Thank you very much. Very much appreciate it. I will open the floor to questions. Anybody have questions for Chris? I've got two, actually. One is what's gonna be the process on the new 5-year plan? And what will be public, input into that?
So if we follow the same process that the board outlined last time, there would obviously be a lot of involvement with community stakeholders. I don't see that changing, but I'm actually in the process of looking at, sometimes in the world of education strategic plans, the process evolve a bit. And there's a lot of other districts throughout the country that are using different programs. I was supposed to sit in on a webinar, unfortunately, when I was ill, just to get some other ideas that I was going to present to the board to say, do we want to follow the same process as last time, or do we want to maybe move the process a bit? I don't envision whatever process the board settles on would eliminate the stakeholder feedback that you're all used to. I wouldn't recommend that. But I know that last time, I believe the district brought a consultant in to sort of walk them through the process. We're at that exploratory stage of it. But I think there's some openness to, hey, what's the best way to do this to meet the needs of the district going forward. I think you as a board and as a community are all going to have a very big input into that, because ultimately we're here to meet the needs of the entire community.
Great, thanks. And then, in the world where we are, the second day of the new administration, and you're talking at the federal level, and you're talking about a starting July 1 expectation of $443,000 of federal money coming in. If that money does not come in, will the programs that it support, will those end, or will the town need to pick up the $443,000?
I don't have a crystal ball as to what's going to happen. What I can say is the funding for those programs are because those programs are mandatory, and those programs will follow the law. So for instance, where you see IDEA, that's special education. So I don't envision a world where students don't have rights under under IDEA or under an IEP or through the PPT process. Those are the funding that coincides with that. So it's not designated to one particular program. I know that we're 2 days in, and I've gotten a few messages from parents saying, well, what does this mean? The reality is nobody really knows at this point. I think my guess is a lot of things that are being proposed are going to be challenged in litigation. And if it's at the federal level, by the time it reaches, I have gotten no direction as of this moment from the state on what any of this means. So my answer, which I haven't answered anyway, because they all came in today, was, we all are waiting on calls to find out how the state is going to guide us on how to react into anything that may impact our world. But right now it's a little bit premature to say. But as far as the funding from the federal government goes, I wouldn't anticipate that going away anytime soon, because a lot of that is tied into federal law. If in the event that it does go away or would go away, I would assume that's going to take some significant time. So I'm not overly concerned about the funding being dried up for next fiscal year and have to go back to the town and ask to replace it. But you never know. But my guess at this point would be that those programs are pretty much secure, because a lot of that is tied up in the legal system.
Carl?
How are you? So you talked about a very small influx of children or kids. Where in the school system?
The majority we're seeing are at Goodwin. We did get a couple of students at the middle school and a couple at the high school, but the larger population shift that we're starting to see is at Goodwin. And we are starting to see kids coming in, that we anticipate as they're getting ready for preschool and for ECP. But the majority of that, small number of kids that have increased since October 1 have been at Goodwin. And I would anticipate that if we do see an increase in enrollment, it's going to be at Goodwin.
Okay. How big is the kindergarten class this year? Do you know?
I think it's 64 students.
Okay. The reading program, I remember Jan bringing this up to me 2 or 3 years ago. And I went to a CCM legislative committee meeting, and there's usually at a well-attended one, 50 or 60 first selectmen or mayors. And I remember bringing it up, and no one knew what I was talking about. And And yet Jan was saying how this is coming and it could be very expensive. So we, as I recall, it's funded. So is it implemented?
It's funded, it is implemented. We are in the second year of its implementation. So it has been properly funded. We are, a lot of it has to do with the professional development for our staff. But to just put in perspective, Carl, I mentioned that our ECS reimbursement from the state is $131,000. The ARC program cost $175,000 last year. So a legislative mandate cost more than the state actually gave us in educational cost sharing. So it is funded, it is continued, it is built in. We were able to reduce a little bit because we're in that second phase, but there is still requirements that we have to meet to make sure our staff are up to speed.
Right. I'm very familiar with the ECS because the ECS was $550,000 when I first came into office. And now it's it's been 120 or 130,000 for several years now. And I did see in the newspaper, and I assume this is something you may want to brag about, that the reading scores, was it reading or math, were pretty good?
Math. Well, reading went down, math. There was a drastic increase in math and in science. Our reading score sort of stayed flat, but overall our academic growth last year increased in our accountability index very well across most disciplines. So the work that went in is working. It's just building upon that. But I think one of the themes was the demographics of and the needs of our students have changed, and we have to change with them. So that's where balancing the resources that we provide for our kids are making sure that they match the needs that our kids have.
Great, thank you.
Okay, George?
So Chris, and also Pam, first of all, congratulations on your first budget presentation, and Pam as well for putting it together. Well, very well done, and thank you for the presentation. I just have a couple questions about the high needs numbers that you had mentioned. So you mentioned that 40% of our population are high needs, and you're defining high needs as special education, multilingual, and free and reduced lunch. Is that the three categories?
Yes.
So I assume we're not double counting, right? So that's 40%. So if a person is in two categories, we're not counting that person twice, right? So, but even with not double counting, that to me sounds very high. So I want to have two questions related to that. One, are we higher than say, let's not compare it to the Bridgeport and the Hartford, but are we higher than say Clinton or Old Line or Deep River and so on? I'll start with the first question.
Oh, sorry. So yes, some of those kids could be, for lack of a better term, double counted because they may meet multiple categories. So a student could be free and reduced lunch and also have an IEP, so they would be categorized as free and reduced lunch and special education. So that's when you look at, we broke it down in historical enrollment data, but there's actual state data that will just that number that it comes directly from the state. We submit our information to them that actually gets sort of regurgitated back to us. So there's and the purpose for that is so that everybody is using the same metrics when districts are comparing each other. So that number is true. It's 40%. And a lot of that is based on whether it's special education, free and reduced lunch, or again, 8% of our kids are multi-language learners. So we're not double counting, but there could be kids that have multiple qualifications. We compare a little bit high to some of our surrounding districts, and I don't have it all in front of me at the moment. But this is a general trend that a lot of districts are seeing. And I know you brought up, don't compare it to like Bridgeport and New Haven. I came from a district that was 65% classified as being high needs. So although 40 seems high, it's about in line where a lot of districts are. And one thing that we are seeing, and I know this is happening sort of statewide, there's a lot of talk at the legislature now about special education. And the reason for that, and I'm trying to minimize it, but over what the last 5 years our kids have experienced, a lot of kids are now going through, when you go through the special education process, it's a process where you have to be identified. You go through a planning and placement team. But prior to that, and that's why we listed out kids who have 504s. Usually 504s are for some sort of medical diagnosis where a kid would need an accommodation based on a medical condition. Traditionally, when I was growing up, I'll use myself as an example. I didn't have one, but I may have gotten a 504 because I broke my leg and I needed an elevator key. So my accommodation was I was going to be late for class because I couldn't get there in time. So it wasn't my fault. I had a broken leg. What we've seen in the last 5 years are those diagnoses from 504s. A lot of it is around mental health, kids dealing with anxiety, depression, things along those lines. So they may start as a 504, so they're not technically considered special education. But if the accommodations are working, they're going to work their way into being in an IEP. So a lot of districts, we are all seeing this sort of universally across the state, is the amount of kids who qualify for special education services are increasing, but that's because of the world and the environment they're in. So I don't know if I answered your question good enough, George, but I tried.
We did, thank you. So I did make this follow up from that just a little bit then. So I appreciate that students on whether it's 504 or special education or whether it's multilingual may need additional support from teachers. But I'm just curious about the free and reduced lunch population, which based on your slide is a pretty hefty population as well. Do the teachers know which students are free and reduced?
Traditionally, they won't. But these kids don't have a sign. They may know because of the forms they fill out, or depending upon the lunch status when they go to the cafeteria. But there's nothing that that there's not a sign that kids wear that say I'm on free or reduced lunch.
Understood. So then by that description, then there's no special treatment of students on free and reduced lunch in terms of extra resources needed, impact on teachers.
There could be resources on, things that kids may or may not have access to. I think that one of the pillars of the district strategic plan is obviously on equity, and people have their own definition on what equity means. But I know what equity is, and making sure that our kids all have the same equitable access to programming, material, supplies as they need based on their needs. So it may not be necessarily what's easier for one family may be a bit more difficult for another family. And that's where our teachers really sort of do the heavy lifting to identify that if they send something home, to make it sure that the kids in there, knowing their kids well enough that maybe a child isn't able to bring something that another kid would ordinarily bring in, or making sure we have backup worth of materials for kids that otherwise may be supplied by home, but the family doesn't have the resources to do it. So our staff do an amazing job of knowing their kids as well as they can. Although there's not, like I said, there's not a name tag that a child will wear. But it does have an impact on how we operate certain things, because we know every student doesn't have the same access outside of the building as some of their counterparts will.
Correct.
To pick up on what George was asking you about, from 2022 to 2024, the number of students in the three compilation that George was just talking about went from 500 students in 2022 to 499 in 2024. So it's pretty stable. And I was wondering if you could tell me the percentage increase from 2022 to 2024 in the total cost of those three components for the reduction of one student from 2022. I would just be interested in that number.
You're looking for a correlated cost?
Yeah.
For a
I mean,
high
what did
need
it cost us
student?
for those three, for the 500 students in 2022 versus 2024, we had 499 in the same grouping. Was there a big difference? I'm sure there was. I would just like to know the
Are
number.
you looking for want to make sure we get you the information you're looking for. So are you looking for a comparison of the number of students?
No.
No, you're looking for the
Just a total
associate
number, 1 year to the next, so I can get a percentage increase.
for a dollar cost.
Yeah.
We don't track a dollar cost by student based on high needs. We can't associate a specific dollar. You can't determine individually the cost of.
You have three groups there. You have the
Mhm.
504, you have the reduced lunches, and you have the special ed, I think is a good one. So you don't have a total breakdown for each component? you didn't spend like, say, 500,000 on special ed, 100,000 on reduced lunches, you don't break
Well,
it out
just
that way?
as Chris had said, for example, with our free and reduced students, that's an indicator of economic challenges. So we don't track a student and say, you're free and reduced and the additional cost because you're free and reduced. I'm sorry, I'm not under,
Yeah,
Chris, do
I
you?
can't believe you can't give me that information on a total number by group, it can't. I mean, I'm not asking for individuals.
No, I understand. What I'm saying, as a group, we don't track an individual cost of student by category. We don't say a 504 student costs per pupil expenditure for a 504 student is this, per pupil expenditure for special education student is that. And we wouldn't be able to quantify additional costs related to our students who are economically challenged because we don't actually identify them in the classroom and say, this student needed support for a field trip, or this student needed extra help after school or at a study hall because they have an after-school job, because their family doesn't have money for lunches. So the services are so individualized and we don't quantify a specific dollar amount to that student and track it that way. So we wouldn't be able to give you a dollar amount for a category of student broken out like that. We can overall say additional services include, we have additional social workers added to the buildings that address both the special education and our economically challenged. Chris, unless you have experience from Enfield in a way, knowing the way our numbers run, we don't, other than an outplaced student, there's no way to say this student costs this much based on their high needs.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that I understood the question, so thanks for jumping in, Pam. There isn't a way to put, and I don't know how it's been, I'm assuming how it's been tracked here traditionally. Like there may be a way, and I want to make sure I get you something that they're looking for. Like say special education might be a little bit easier to track because you know what your overall, it wouldn't be by student, it might be your overall cost of special education year over year over year. It may be possible to look at, because there's also, I know there's a historical data, our ML students aren't in there. You can make a direct correlation to cost associated, say, like for staff to service our students who are multi-language learners. So there may be a way to look at that. The challenging part, as what Pam said, is it's not going to be an exact science. There's not a way to sort of pinpoint how much did we spend on kids who are, economically disadvantaged, because a lot of times we can't alienate what those particular costs may or may not be. But in the special education, in the multi-language learners world, there may be a way to get you some data. I don't know. I don't have it with me obviously now. But that's something that I'll talk to Pam about tomorrow to see if we can at least get you something that it may not be exactly what you're looking for, and I apologize, but it's hard to quantify what you pay for certain kids based on their designation, because of there's no way to quantify that. I don't know if that makes sense or not. I'm hearing it for the first time, so.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Brad?
You mentioned the health issue with the kids. Did the school ever looked at what's causing these emotional problems for these kids?
I mean, yes, we're constantly looking, and we're constantly, as the needs that kids are coming in with, obviously we have to service them. So we want to look at what the root cause of it is. Honestly, I think we're starting to, and this won't make sense by me saying this here, but if you had a time machine and you went back 5 years, every one of my budget presentations that I've given in my past life was, remember this conversation. We're going to be dealing with this for a while. If you think about logistically what we did, we sent an entire nation of kids home, and we're starting to see those. And those are kids that left in March and didn't finish out kindergarten, first grade, second grade. They're still here. And really it's not just the academic loss that they had, but we're dealing with the social and emotional issues that, and I don't want to blame it all on that. And obviously society has a big implication on things that happen, but we are seeing the effects of that. Kids that are coming in that are just dysregulated. They can't sit in a school for 6.5 hours a day. Some never had to. And then you're seeing some kids, and it has an impact, not just the kids that were sent home, but the impact that this had on families that led up to this point. So we're dealing with our new reality of our kids are coming in with, we're seeing higher levels of anxiety. We're seeing higher levels of depression, things that we didn't see years ago. We're seeing significant and challenging behaviors. Kids who are unregulated and or would have, traditionally you wouldn't think of a 5-year-old kid that might have an issue where they just, become disruptive in a classroom per se. And we see that it's becoming more and more common, and it's incumbent upon us to not only deal with the services that the child needs, but also a lot of our staff members are seeing behaviors for the first time, and we have an obligation to make sure we're supporting them and training them appropriately too. So a lot has changed than when, even as far back as, 4 or 5 years ago. And we're still seeing the impact of what kids had gone through. It's not, I take no pleasure in reporting this, but that's the world that we live in. So I think what's incumbent upon us is to try to be creative on how we service kids, particularly in a smaller district, and having conversations with our counterparts in other towns to say, if you're seeing a certain population, we may only have 3 kids that are exhibiting this behaviors, but they may have 3 kids, and maybe we can put our heads together and work on that way. So I'm having those conversations with my colleagues. It's just, it's really early in the process, but I think you don't be surprised if you hear a lot of statewide news about when it comes to education, particularly funding. The conversation this year is 100% driven towards special education. And that's the reason why, because we're all experiencing the same things.
You ever looked at it to do with their diet, their nutrition?
It could be. I mean, I'm not a scientist, and I don't sit in a lot of the meetings. I'm open to any explanation on what's best for kids. But I think a lot of I mean, to be honest, when we first came out of this and we were feeding all of our kids, at least we knew when we had students in with us for 6 hours a day, every kid was eating what we gave them. That has now gone away. We don't feed every single student, for free like we did for the first, year and a half coming out. So maybe that had an impact on it. I wouldn't want to speak out of turn and say that's the case. I don't know definitively, but whatever's happening, we need to deal with it. I always tell we're preparing kids for a world that we don't understand and doesn't exist yet. I don't understand it, and I've got my own kids that I don't understand what they're talking about half the time. So that's the challenge of us constantly trying to sort of be ahead of everything.
Other questions? Chris, thank you very much. Hope you get better soon and fast. And Pam, thank you for your help as well.
Thank you,
will,
guys.
We will move on, and Bill, see you here if you want to step on up and tell us about who you do.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Chris. So while we're in this hiatus, I'll just give you the point that we all received the PowerPoint.
Yep.
We've seen the numbers, so we know that. I think maybe being able to focus a little bit on any of the big changes you want. And obviously, some of the highlights of the accomplishments from last year. But I'll leave it to you, but just to give you a little sense of direction.
Okay. All right, presenting our budget here. Let's see, I'm just gonna sit so I can see it better. All right, department budget for 2026, Public Works, Transfer Station, structure and staffing, department accomplishments, cost containment, process of improvements, capital requests. We do have a 2 to 5 year horizon of what we're thinking about, and conclusion, so right here. All right, Department of Public Works. The Department of Public Works budget is virtually flat with 11% over 2025. The salaries and benefits are lower due to turnover. The saving is offset slightly higher operational expenses.
Just because there may be somebody who watches this after this meeting, you're not up 11%. You're actually
Point excuse me.
Yes. So I just want to make it clear to anybody who's watching this later that that's not 11%.
Thank you. All right, the transfer station department budget is up 2.4% over 2025. It is led by the benefits. New employee, one of our employees chose a 2-person plan for health insurance.
And the defined contribution plan is always charged to the budget versus defined benefit where we have one line item. So the employee before was in defined benefit and this one was in defined contribution. So the benefits were up, but it wasn't necessarily an expense to the transfer station.
All right, we are a 9-member team, 6 full-time employees, and then 2 park maintainers that are also full-time. During the summer, we have a 12-week part-time employee that comes in and gives us a hand. We have a director of public works, myself, a crew chief, 2 maintainer 3s, and 5 maintainer 2s. Transfer station is a 5-member team. We are fully staffed up there. We have a full-time maintainer 3, 3 part-time operators, and 1 part-time attendant. Rich Champlin has retired. We've moved Matt Nickerson up there, and he's our maintainer 3 to the team. Department of Public Works, for our accomplishments, we've replaced some broken drainage pipe and some catch basins in Maplewood Street. We had a cave-in. We saw a lot of cave-ins this year due to all the water that we've had. It's really gone through, and the older pipes are washing everything out, causing it. We've installed new underground power and a concrete pad out on Main Street for events, so we have more power there. Installed drainage and catch basin on 2nd Ave, that's all new. We had a massive drainage problem there. We redid the drainage work at the splash pad at Trask. It was failing. The place was always flooding out. So we went through, dug it all up and changed it over. See, we redid the bullpens at Trask Park and bullpens at Trask Park. And we've redone the softball field as well. Paving this year, we paved East Lane, Cottage Road, Saltair Drive, Clearwater Road, Bel Air Drive, Heartlands Drive, Sea Lane 2, Obit Heights Road, and Obit Heights, we actually went through and we milled and repaved. Now, all the other roads that we did the paving to, that was a full reclaim. We pulverized the road, put a basin, went through, redid all the drainage that was there, added drainage into our problem areas. So the drainage that was there before was probably operating at 30% in some areas. Let's see. We also groom the beaches with our beach cleaner. We do that every week. Sometimes, as long as our schedule allows it, 2 times a week, Monday and Friday. We've done some line striping. We redid the parking lot at Park and Rec. We painted some lines at the Point. We painted lines at Town Beach. We continue to make compost up at the Founders Park. And we assisted in the celebration of Saybrook Day. And we also assisted in eliminating the invasive species at Saybrook Point and Founder's Park. That was quite a project. We went through there, mowed it all up, and then we placed out black plastic to try and kill it. So
When you pull the plastic up,
it has been pulled.
how'd it go?
It did what it was supposed to do.
Oh, good.
So we're gonna see, I mean, it broke through in a couple of spots, but we're gonna see how it makes out. Continue on. It's probably gonna need more work.
Yeah, I mean, it was.
The mugwort was,
Somewhat successful.
Yeah.
I will tell you that some of the folks who live down at the end of Coulter Street weren't so happy staring at it.
Mhm.
I got a couple complaints from residents, who called me to their house and said, you need to look at this. And I told them, you know, it's a short period of time, and then it came off shortly thereafter.
How long did you leave it down?
I wanna say it was down for
Not quite a year.
no, it wasn't quite a year.
Yeah.
6 months, maybe 7.
So you cut it, removed it, and then put the plastic back?
So yeah, we got it, yep.
Talking about Fragmite?
Phragmite, mugwort, not Phragmite, knotweed. And mugwort and
Those are, you don't need,
those were the
you don't
two.
need anything else, just
Yeah,
those two, it's plenty.
So
Those are the worst.
it did really well with the mugwort. The knotweed definitely was a lot harder to kill, and we weren't as successful as we were supposed to be.
So you cut it in the spring and then remove it in the fall?
Yes, yeah. All right, the transfer station for our accomplishments, we removed and got rid of 2 old worn out dumpsters. We went through the back of our facility, we did some regrading there, the road's always getting hammered on there. It's just a hard spot, the water gets trapped there, so we need to try and keep up on the grading, so it's not ponding all the time. We went through, we cleaned out all of our basins that we had there at our transfer station. Let's see, we implemented passes, so we have handed out 10,000 passes, 95% of all town residents, for the transfer station. It's working out well. The guys are really on top of it. We're following through, and we're gonna continue to. The economy's exchange is busier than ever. We are doing food scraps. That is going well. Anybody have any questions?
How much, tonnage were you doing with food scraps?
So the food scraps are probably, I wanna say it's like 150 to 200 pounds per barrel. I don't have the chart right in front of me, so I do apologize about that.
And they're taking out 4 barrels a week?
They're taking out 4 barrels a week, yes.
So you're doing 600 to 800 pounds
600 to 800.
savings from being in the dumpster.
Yep.
So our MSW has gone down 3 years in a row. I mean, when I say 3 years in a row, I have 3 years of data. And it has gone down there's a trend downwards. Just one other thing on, it would probably belong on the prior page. Public Works crew was hugely helpful in doing a lot of work at Beaver Dam Trail.
Yes.
I didn't see
It
that
did.
up there.
I do have some slides of the work that we
Okay.
completed there. I didn't mention it. So I'll tell you really quick, we needed to move over the power lines so they could get in and do the work that they have to do. So we had to start, dig a trench, lay down 5 conduits. We had to cover them in concrete, separate the power conduits from the communication conduits. So in case there was ever a problem, the power company could rip up theirs and leave out what else we had there. So it was quite the project. Came out great. They just pulled the wires through it the other day, and the town went in there and they're good. They're ready to start the project.
And that project will start in June.
Why are there 5 coming?
So AT&T, Comcast, one spare, and then the 2 power. So 2 4-inch and the rest were 3-inch.
Bill, I know you don't have it in front of you, but going back to the food scrap, if you've got a chart that shows what the collection has been over, say, the last 24 months, or whatever, it would be interesting to see whether we're beginning to get more and more people involved.
Okay, yep, and I can email that over and.
That'd be great. Thank you.
And one of the initiatives that we're spinning off is at the Goodwin School. Hopefully we're teaching the kids younger that do something with your food scraps besides throw them in the garbage. And then I would be hopeful that over the course of the next 12 years in the community, we see less and less. And there's more of a demand for blue barrels or a regional composting site. We're paying for Blue Earth. We pay about $347 a month for Blue Earth to take away the food scraps at the transfer station. And about $250 a month is going to be the cost at the Goodwin School. The Goodwin School won't save us any money. It's kind of more of an educational experiment to try to educate kids, because that waste is not going to the transfer station. We are paying for both those services from the small bottles fund. Okay, directly out of that. I just want everybody to know that.
But when those kids come home, they rate their parents.
Right,
Well,
then we're going to
exactly.
hear-
They can teach their families how
Right.
to
Well,
do it.
that's the
It's
idea.
true, yeah.
That is the idea.
Any other questions? All right, moving forward. All right, so this year for our cost containment, we did our storage bins at our DPW facility. So we ended up pouring a pad and then we placed our mafia blocks around there. That's gonna save us a lot of money. Reason being is, when we're done with a job, we have a flat place to put it. We've got wash clean stone that we use for drainage and, we're throwing it in piles and by the time it's done, it's all wasted. So, and then it goes as fill versus us being able to stockpile, have it on hand. And our 500-gallon waste oil tank, we put to good use, got it all hooked up and it is operational. So
Where do you get the waste oil from?
our facility. And it seems to be, there's a huge increase right now, and I'm pretty positive the reason being is everything is so expensive. So instead of people paying for their oil changes, they're doing their own and bringing the oil in, so. All right, capital request. We are looking for a Bobcat forklift, the D30S9. There's a preview of it up there. Our two to 5 year capital needs, we are going to need a mason dump and a DPW garage renovation.
When you say renovation, what are you talking about?
So the facility that we're currently in, we had,
You talking about the new building on the left?
no, the building where the office is, the dog pound, and our other, the other garage there.
Well, and it's in very poor condition.
It isn't,
I mean, it's old. I mean,
we had a roof leak probably, I wanna say, maybe a year and a half ago. And that did some damage and we did have the roof patched and they said, you're looking at 5 years out of it, possibly 10. So just kind of trying to move forward and think of some ideas of how we can get updated with that, bring it up to speed to this age.
Is it a pitched roof or a flat roof?
It is a flat roof over the dog pound and then the other half of it is slightly pitched. I mean, it's very minimal.
Would it make sense to use trusses and make it a
So
612 or something?
So my idea was, in order, I wanted to try and upgrade it to where we should be and where everybody else is, a spot where we can do on-site training, have a spot where the guys can sit at a table, I can put a monitor up, we can go through, do our safety training, a spot where guys can eat lunch where it's not on the equipment or alongside of it. And just, a bathroom, a shower, possibly some cubbies for us when we're working late, so we have areas to keep our equipment and whatnot.
so that's the idea is that if you've taken a tour of that building, and I don't know if you have or not,
I was in it last year.
It's crappy, and there's really no other good adjective for it. It's not, it's kind of lousy to work in. So good news, bad news, from their point of view and your point of view is it can't expand much because it's in an inland, it's on an aquifer and there's inland wetlands, so there's very little you can do there. I have Lynette Wacker looking at, monitoring this. The idea would probably be to improve the first floor and build a second floor on top of that first floor over the office part. And that's where maybe you have a break room, some showers, maybe a training room, improve the lower room also. That's really going to be your expansion. Maybe pulling out the garage a little bit. Bill said he can't fit all his equipment and cover it all, so some gets left out. So obviously we're investing in new equipment. So the garage area would come out more so that they have better coverage for all the equipment. And then on the right, probably making it a 2-floor, that's a concept. The building itself is masonry,
Yes, cinder block.
cinder
I mean,
block.
I'll say this, if you're sitting in that building on a windy day and it blows too hard, mouse poop's falling from the ceiling on you. So, I mean, let's put it simple, I mean, it's not that can't be cleaned up, but they're gonna come back, it's an older building.
So the building we had built across the way there, if I remember right, that was around, we had the Amos Stewart, it was around 100,000,
There was about 200, I want to say, something
maybe all
like
said
that.
and done. I thought the building itself was around 90 or.
I don't remember.
That's what I remember.
Yeah.
Then we did all that other stuff in it.
Yeah.
Power and stuff.
Yeah.
But
That's really the house equipment.
yeah, no, I'm not trying to change the building. I'm just saying that when you look at the square footage we gained for the price.
Huge.
And what's the square footage of that?
Let's see,
50 by 100?
I think it's bigger than 50. I'm not 100% positive, so I can't give you that actual number.
But anyway, as we get any estimates, I'll bring forth and let you guys know. I know Downs has brought on an architect to do some renderings. Have they met with you yet?
We just met today.
Oh, well, okay. So now they have a concept of what the needs might be, and they'll just draw a concept and give us an idea.
Great. Conclusion.
All right, the Department of Public Works is responsible for maintaining the town's infrastructure and waste and recycling. The DPW budget is up 2,176 or 0.11% with no material year-over-year charges. The transfer station budget is up 17,454 or 2.4%, the majority of which is contributed to employee benefits and choices. If you can take a look, that picture one there is us placing the black plastic down at Founders.
Great. Questions, people?
He's got more pictures.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Public Works and Transfer Station, just wanted to say thank you. That's an example of well, that's not an example, that is the conduit work on Beaver Dam Trail that we were laying down. Second picture over from your left. The next picture is the drainage pipe replacement. That's it.
Great.
Any
Sorry,
sort
didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay.
How big of an area did you black?
I'm sorry, what's
How
that?
big of an area did you use the black plastic?
It was shy of, let's see, so we started out with an acre's worth of black plastic, some of it was torn, so almost the whole side that you see when you're pulling up the Founders Park. And we have been mowing Founders Park with our new mower, and it's working out great.
Other questions? George?
I actually have a question. So let's fill out my presentation. So my first question actually for Leanne, why do we separate out public works and transfer station to two budget as opposed to one?
Actually, there are 6 budgets, and Public Works makes up administration, highway and streets, help me Bill, vehicles,
Snow,
snow, And transfer station
And-
is,
Waste and disposal, waste transport, transportation admin, and that's all.
Okay,
Is that because of, the, state?
UCOA,
Yeah,
UCOA, yes,
UCOA.
yes. So that's how all towns, allocate those same things, yes.
So there was the state mandate about 10 years ago, uniform chart of accounts, and we made that switch 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Mhm.
Big difference at the time for us because they really want you to categorize smaller things like snow, and so it's really broken out more. So it's not intended to be complicated because there's 6 budgets, it's just the uniform chart of accounts. So when you're comparing Old Saybrook to Clinton, you should be able to compare apples to apples.
And at the end of the year, we are required to submit all of these budgets up to the OPM. And then some of the reports that they give out at a later date compares towns to other towns, so that we can compare ourselves against the field.
and I suspect that the largest component of your budget for public works is probably paving. And so a few years ago, a while back, you mentioned that there's this program where you can rate roads. Are you guys,
I just signed the contract last week.
Yeah,
I was just curious how you decided which roads got paved.
so this is great. So, for me, you gotta look at when the roads were done, the condition of the road, how many people are traveling down the road. And then you also gotta put in consideration, okay, can I mill this road and pave it, even though it's not quite ready yet, and save it to get the longevity out of it? Or, for instance, Cornfield Point, I went with the complete to pulverize the whole road. Reason being was, that was an older neighborhood. When we were digging down, you dig down a little bit and you could start seeing some topsoil layers in the road. So the best thing to do would be to pulverize it, get the material down deep, start with the base and work your way up. But I have suggested, and Carl has also suggested we found a program that can go through, it monitors all the roads and gives a breakdown of suggestions and possible alternatives from just paving. And give you, possibilities for chip seal, micro sealing, a full pulverization, things like that, and a whole breakdown. And it will also take and compile all our roads and give us a number of, okay, so in 10 years from now, if we were to put $600,000 into paving, we would make our goal for the roads that we want done on this list. So.
Okay, other questions? Oh, sure.
One more, sorry. Yeah, so a while back, we bought these big belly bins.
We bought
Two.
only one has been deployed.
So only one has been deployed.
Do you guys collect that?
And yes, we did.
Is it working?
It is working. It is working. It was, it's actually right out in front of town hall. The rest of them are going in. It's actually on the list to do in the next 2 weeks. We have to pour bases for them and bolt them to the bases to keep them out of the sidewalk range or out of the sidewalk.
Okay, are we ready? Good enough.
Can I just say one thing?
You certainly may.
Thank you.
So I may have said this last year, obviously Larry was here for 20 years. Bill works differently, but, I want to compliment Bill. He assumed the position. We did interview for the position and he's done a great job. Bill is, responsive to the citizens, is willing to think differently, really tackles problems in a very timely manner. Not that this is not a reflection on Larry. He just works differently, but really effectively for the town. And I think the taxpayers they're lucky to have you right now. And we're trying to, he's 2 guys short. We're about to put an offer letter out for another guy. So hopefully he'll only be down 1 in about a week.
So,
Well, thanks for all you do. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, we will move on and Madam Treasurer.
Yeah, I actually,
Before you start, though, can
I have two things I'm gonna hand out while you
Okay.
speak, is that okay?
That would be perfect. Is there anybody here who can run this show? Because I'm afraid we are just screen for.
I'll fix it.
We minimize the people, but they're still on there, I think, because they were interfering with the, I have two quick little charts that I'm gonna talk about very briefly. That
Well
Mr.
done.
Nichols from Morgan Stanley sent for the pension. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I didn't have enough copies for the selectmen, but since Eric's not here, you can share his? Are you guys sharing his, Karen?
Okay, thank
Very
you.
good. So, here you go. One, two, you guys should pass it. 1, 2, 3, 4.
And you'll,
Five.
you'll
Take
speak as a
one, pass
radio
down.
announcer.
The top sheet here is for the town pension. And then the second sheet is for the fire department. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This is fire. We'll get into that. I'm gonna talk too much about it. Okay. One is for you, Jerry. Haven't got that yet.
Yeah, thank you.
That's the town, this is the fire.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Yeah.
And there's Larry. Get here soon enough to send to hand it out ahead of time, sorry about that.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
You're up.
I'm up, tag I'm at. Okay, so we'll start with our executive summary for December 31, 2024. It's like, hold on. Fiscal year to date, the town has received revenue of $34,951,843, or 67.9% of the total amount of the $51,440,042 budgeted for fiscal year 25. In comparing our performance to last fiscal year, we are 1.4% ahead of this time last year. So then we'll move to our authorized investment section on your first page there. At the end of December, the town had 35.5 million in its bank accounts. In the last month, the stiff rate has moved down slightly to 4.76%, and today it is at 4.43%. And as you know, Webster gives us the stiff rate in arrears, and their rate last month was 4.93%. Any questions there?
I got a question on local revenues. They're up quite a bit.
Excuse me?
The local revenues.
Do you want to wait till she gets to it on the back?
The million eight?
Okay, all right, no worries. Go ahead.
Okay, so then we'll get to the pension. We got our report from Morgan Stanley at the end of December. The town pension plan is up this is not on your chart yet. The town pension plan is up 3.92% fiscal year to date versus its benchmark of 3.55%. Over the 3-year horizon, the town plan has returned 1.9% versus its benchmark of 3.48%. The fire department pension plan is up 4.11% fiscal year to date and has returned 2.41% over the 3-year horizon versus its benchmark of 3.48%. So then I gave you the two charts, which Mr. Nichols sent me. So just to give you a little, update since the last time he was here. So I've included that breakdown of the two pension fund portfolios. So you can see the breakdown of fixed income to equities. So in 2005, the pension fund became a spending portfolio, meaning that it pays out more in benefits than it takes in for contributions from the town and its employees. If we hadn't invested the money and we just put the funds under the mattress, so they say, the value would be only 4,813,802. Sure. As you'll see on that first graph of the town. All right, I'm just playing around with my papers. But because we invested it the way we did, we have over $28 million today. Net cash flows out of the portfolio over the past 10 years have been $6,283,921. But the dividends and interest generated by the portfolio has been $5,581,231. And despite the withdrawals, the pension fund has grown from 9.5 million to 28 million today. The funded ratio of the plan has grown from 66% back in 2015 to approximately 90% today, pending the latest actuarial valuation report that we will receive in March or April. So those two reports just kind of show you the breakdown of the fixed income, the equities, the cash, and that is ran as of January 16th, and that's for the fire and the town. So that was just a quick little review for you. Okay? Any questions on that?
No, very interesting, thank you.
Okay. So then, just going over, our total cash balances are 35.5 million. Our total pension balances are 30.6 million. For total assets under management of 66.1 million. Page 2 of the treasurer's report, so the revenues broken out in more detail. Tax revenues were 4,242,124 for the month, bringing the fiscal year to date total to 32,850,228, or 66.6% of the amount budgeted for fiscal year 25. You'll see in the state revenue, the state of Connecticut sent our annual OPM Veterans Grant for $8,440. And then in terms of local revenues, the town collected $189,037 locally, for a total of $4,439,601 in local revenues, for a total of $34,951,843, or 67.9% of our fiscal year 25 budget. That's all I have.
Brad, you have a question now?
All right, I think I answered.
Yeah.
Other questions for the treasurer? None? Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome, sir.
We'll move on to the finance director's report.
So, I'm gonna start with ARPA. I'm gonna turn to page 2, and as I said, things are really starting to move now in terms of using the money. So over the month of December, ARPA expenditures increased by $717,000 to $1.6 million. And that was mainly attributable to the road paving. When we swapped that out, we had already contracted with or spent most of that money. So that was utilized during December. We spent $22,000 to Himalaya. And then we paid for half of the generator at the Acton Public Library. And of course, some of the monies that were designated to the Historical Society for the wooden stones and the HVAC. So really made a big dent in the month of December there. And, as I said, this is going to continue as we move forward to see a lot of movement in the ARPA funds, hopefully, very quickly. On page 3, Are the finance director's report under reimbursable grants. Just to note that we did have a town meeting on January 7th, and both of the reimbursable cybersecurity grant and the LIS FF24 grants were approved by town meeting. So we're going to move forward with those. On page 4, the cash flow really has been all over the place during the month of December, affected by both the collection of taxes and ARPA funds. So in the general fund, we're up, we're usually negative, but we're up $683,000 because of the advanced collection of taxes that are due in the month of January. So general fund revenues were 4.4 million, as the treasurer just went over, and expenses were 3.7 million. So we net we're up about 700,000. Capital funds were up 900,000. This had a lot to do with transfers. We moved $500,000 of crosswalk funds into the capital account, $100,000 of seawall funds, $150,000 for park and rec, $114,000 for the scanning project, and $100,000 for the generator. In the reserve funds, we are down $187,000. We had $200,000 from the capital non-recurring account that went again for the scan and the $100,000 that we made to the Acton Public Library for the town. We also wrote a check for $379,000 from the sewer avoidance fund, which is part of the 1.8 million that we are spending on the work for WPCA Phase 3. Other checks are going to see that those funds moving out again over the course of the next year. And then in terms of non-major funds, those funds were up 328,000. And again, that was due to movements. We put the housing task force funds of 500,000 in there. And the Mariners Way funds of $250,000. And that was offset by some ARPA funds moving out. So lots of activity, you can all see it, but everything that was approved by the Board of Finance is just mainly being executed here. And then in terms of capital outlays, there's not very much going on there, but you will note that the Public Works Fund is positive. It's 337,000. Again, ARPA funds coming in of $261,000 for the dump truck, one dump truck, and $130,000 for the flail mower. When we pay for those, it's going to go negative again. So don't get too excited about that. And then capital expenditures for fiscal year 25, we've spent almost everything, 621,000 of our 693. And again, we spent all that money for the highway and streets, the paving money transferred out to the crosswalks. Okay, so that's all done. And in all of the other funds, there's nothing unusual. Everything is trending the way that it is supposed to. Any comments on those, unless you have any questions?
Any questions for Leanne?
I have a question. Dan,
Yes.
on the ARPA, so the money that is obligated but unspent is in our account, so are we still earning interest on this stuff?
So I meant to mention that. So what we did, we put $1.2 million and put it off to Morgan Stanley to manage for us. We actually took that back in December, and we took it back plus interest. So we brought in 1.2 million, and the total interest that we earned on that was 132,000. So from this point forward, it's now in an off budget account. So it's not gonna, there's only like $260,000 worth of cash, because we have put all of these projects to where these funds to where all the projects belong.
Okay.
So if we do earn money on what's left over, it's going to go to the general fund.
I know the state had.
The state had that, yeah,
300, was it?
Yeah.
3 million? Or was it?
350 million.
Yeah.
Interest.
No, not 350.
Yeah, 350 million.
Yeah.
Because they.
Interest there?
In interest, yeah, that they,
Over 3 years.
over.
we're not gonna find that in our.
Unfortunately not.
No, we're done.
Unfortunately not.
Okay, we're not gonna end up then, well, no, you've answered my next question,
Yeah.
which was if we accrue any more, earn any
No.
more interest, we're gonna put that towards
To
the
the
general.
general
And
fund.
just so this board knows, we spent some of the interest, so,
Most of it,
yeah,
Right.
towards ARPA projects.
We spent most of it, so therefore we have a little bit of leeway in case one ARPA appropriation doesn't fully expend itself. We can figure that out. At the end, we're gonna be left over with something, probably, I hope, a little something, and then we'll have to figure out either put it back to the general fund or do something with it.
Thank
When
you.
the time
And that
comes.
may not even be next year.
It will, could be a couple
It won't
of
be the
years.
end next
We
year.
have 2 years, yeah.
Correct.
Until December 31, 26, so.
other questions?
Just a question. I was trying to figure out where, we usually give a donation to the Estuary Council of Seniors. Where is that in the budget? I was having a hard time.
So that's under
locating
political subdivisions.
that. Oh, okay.
We make a yearly appropriation to the Estuary Council of Seniors. They, in
Okay.
fact, they just put in their request, about 45,000, I think it is.
Okay.
Just like we do for the River Valley Transit District. And we, over the years, and I haven't changed a lot of them were in the political subdivisions budget when I came into office in 2011. And I haven't changed, we've added a few here and there, but those are, obviously, we want to support those nonprofits. Our town benefits a lot from both of them. But there are some choices we make with the political subdivision. So when you see that in the budget, if you have any questions about the choices as to who would go to
Yeah.
Shoreline Soup Kitchen, that's a choice. We give them $6,000.
And we'll see that budget on Saturday.
On Saturday, yeah, I was just gonna mention, we're gonna see that on Saturday, and I'll try to get the PowerPoints out by Thursday or Friday, so we'll have a chance to look them over.
Thank you.
Yeah, you know, strangely though, with regard, with regard to the Estuary Council of Seniors, we contribute the full amount they request, not every town does.
Oh, yeah, it's great stuff. But I mean, it's different throughout the state on what towns do to
But
contribute.
for their catchment area, not every town contributes what they're requested to.
Yeah.
And that is a Meals for Wheels, essentially, Meals for Wheels contribution.
Right.
And they serve everybody in that catchment area.
Yeah.
So.
Other questions for the finance director? Hearing none, thank you very much. We will continue to move on and to the elderly benefit recommendation for 26.
Okay, so this year we are recommending 90,000. We have pretty consistently been at 90,000. I think a couple of years ago, we went to 100,000 when we were during COVID, but we moved it back down when we figured that we actually didn't need that much. So, on the second page, I actually added another chart. This was a question that came up last year, was what are the income limits that they have and who qualifies? And so that income chart is included in there. So a long time ago, the state used to reimburse us for the elderly benefits called the circuit breaker account or the circuit breaker something or other. And then they stopped reimbursing us. So now we pay for that ourselves. And in addition, we do this elderly tax benefit. So therefore, during fiscal year 23, because we are, that's probably should read the grand list for 23 because we're off by 1 year. We gave out 78,562 to the qualified recipients, plus we did 97,000. That was the year that we were at 100,000, for a total 176,238. So Bruce asked me to go back and get 5 years worth, which we did get, and there's 126 about, and the amount hasn't changed very much over 5 years. So for 2023, there were 126 residents that took advantage of both of these programs. If they qualify for one, they qualify for the other. And so it totals assessments of about $36.7 million. The tax bills total $557,000. $557,000 altogether. And then from that 557, we would have given, you know, the 78 and the 97, so about $178,000 toward to help them pay their benefits. So as part of the budget process, we do ask the Board of Finance to approve this amount. And then what is going to happen is after this is approved, Carl and I and the assessor and the tax collector, once the grand list is finalized at the end of this month, we start working on estimates for the mill rate, and then we have to take this into consideration to deduct it from what the mill rate will be. So we ask for this approval at this point in the budget process.
Because we don't get any reimbursement from the state for this, right?
Correct.
Are there questions before we take a motion?
Do they, change these figures every year for income, et cetera?
I think they're fairly steady, but the answer is yes, they do change the figures every year because I had one for OPM sends out a memo and tells us what the figures are going to be.
I'm surprised they don't, consider assets.
It's not asset based, yeah, it's income.
It's crazy.
Oh, really? Okay.
Change the law, right?
Still quite well.
Okay, other questions? George?
Just quick one. So you said the last few years, how many years? It'd be 126 residents?
126, yeah, it was 139 at the high, 126, which was last year.
Do they find us or do we go find them?
They have to apply.
They apply, but we advertise it. We push it out there in the quarterly update magazine. Social services puts it out. So we try to get it out to the folks who, who may not know and who we know might apply for it. So we do try to get it out there. It's prorated, obviously. 100, there's 100, if there's 126 households that apply, not everybody's getting the maximum credit, and so it's prorated based on need up to that 90,000.
Okay, so I will take a motion to approve the elderly benefit amount for fiscal year 26 in the amount of $90,000.
So moved.
There is a motion, is there a second? Second by Paul. Any other questions, comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Move on to other budget discussions. Leanne, do you have anything more that you wanna?
I don't have anything more coming on. I'm going to send out I should just say that the capital committee met last week. George and Brad are the two members, and we went through all of the capital items that are included in all of, like, for example, the forklift. And so they have approved that, and we're going to talk about that more on Saturday. So I'll send that information over. And we're gonna have the library and park and rec, and then I'll go over all the other budgets. So pretty close to having, by the end of Saturday, be pretty close to looking at every single.
8:30, right?
8:30.
At 8:30 be here. So, yeah, we're gonna see each other quite a bit over the next 7 days. So we'll have Saturday's meeting at 8:30. Then we also have a scheduled meeting, a special meeting for the 28th. So
Next Tuesday?
Our scheduled meeting, our board of selectmen scheduled meeting. So if we have business we have to do, we'll do it before maybe in a special. With regard to Park and Rec, one of the capital requests was a floor scrubber. I think it was like 26,000. And the schools have so much, space to take care of. I emailed Pam Mastorti just on a lark and said, hey, Pam, are you guys upgrading and do you have a good machine we have such a small space over here that Park and Rec needs to buff out. And as it turns out, I got a call from one of the custodians today, and they may have a very good machine that needs new batteries. It might be it's like a $2,000 investment for the new batteries, but they think the machine's like 5 years old. So, and it's a walk behind. So they're gonna have, one of the manufacturer's reps come look at it, clean it up a little bit. And if it's in good condition, we'll eliminate that capital request. But they have it sitting there. And it's apparently relatively, not new, but not old.
Good enough.
So that was an excellent segue into the selectmen.
Yeah, I don't have much. I wasn't sure how long we were gonna be tonight. So a lot's going on with the Police Executive Research Forum report since it was released. Without divulging too much that, might be happening either behind the scenes or in executive session. We are meeting in executive session tomorrow night with the police commission. I'll be there, obviously. The attorney who the town hired to advise the police commission on the perf report and how to proceed on the perf report will be there. His name is Gabe Duran. He's a Shipman Goodwin lawyer who I've known for a few years. Chubb and I both agreed that we should not use our town attorney on this, keep that a little separate. This would be a lawyer who would stay with the police commission, depending on what they choose to do with the perf report. I have an engagement letter on my desk for an attorney to do some of the investigation into the other work that was the chief has previously admitted with Maverick Motor Group. But it was one of the recommendations was to look into that relationship a little bit more. So that attorney we're bringing on board. He is from a firm called Carmody. It used to be Carmody Torrance when I knew it, but it's now morphed into a different name. It begins with Carmody. I'm trying to think what else. Today I received basically an FOI request from the union, from the police union, asking me to produce emails, phone logs, text messages, and everything else from what led the town to choose perf until today, as well as any financial records that we sent to perf. There were 11 requests in there. So that will be a little bit, I've started on it, a little bit time consuming. Some of the records are public documents, so I'll just refer them to the town archives. So I received that request today from the police union, which I thought, I wasn't sure why I received it from the union, but I assume that reasoning for that will come forward in the days, weeks, and months ahead. So does anybody have any questions on the Police Executive Research Forum report right now? It's obviously it's been time consuming, I will say, but that's okay. One would expect that. It was a substantive report that we are all taking seriously. So some of you may also know that the probate court was seeking better space. I don't know if you know this, we have a 9-town probate court here. I know the board knows it. And the judge they're basically in an interior office upstairs. There's no windows except for one where the judge of probate has her office and it's fixed. It's not able to be opened. So I've talked, the judge went out and got a few quotes. Everything is $16 to $25 a square foot. We currently pay the town of Old Saybrook, $6,000 a year to offset probate court expenses as our share of being a 9-town system. Every other town, the 8 other towns, pay less than the town of Old Saybrook. It's based on grand list per capita. We have the biggest grand list, even though Clinton is a bigger town. Neither here nor there. What I'm saying is it's a really small number, $6,000. we pay into the probate court. The judge and her staff are paid by the state. So, and that obviously includes the space. Well, the judge went out and said, hey, look, I need better space for me and for my staff. And that number would have gone to 30,000 a year based on getting a proper rental and up from there because it's a private rental. So it would presumably go up 1 to 5% a year based on a lease. So she and I got together a week and a half ago with the state probate court administrator, and I'm forgetting the judge's name, who that is. And we looked at the town's second floor offices, and we think that there is something we can do that would be very beneficial for the court and would not impact our staff. This building is an old school. And when they put town hall in it, some of the space is inefficient. And you look at the building office, look at the tax collector's office. They're enormous, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is to give the building the entirety, Tom Makowicki's office and that space in the building office to the probate court, and then have a door connect to the upstairs conference room where the judge currently uses as a daytime courtroom. So we don't use it in the daytime, we use it at night. Tom would move to the fire marshal's office. And the fire marshal would move, he operates out of his car a lot more. So he would move into the current judge of probate's office, which has the fixed window, which we can make open. We can hire tri-state glass to come in and then it'll open. So it'll open, and he can exit in and out of the way the judge and her staff go in and out of that interior office. The better news is really we gain another conference room. So that entire space where the probate court administrative staff is now is wide open, and we'll put another office in there. We're always in need of more conference space. We have the cafeteria, but we always need more. And we actually will make that into usable space. So I had Greg Nucci come by last week from Point One Architects, and he is going to look at the space needs of the probate court, fit it out and make sure it fits with her staff. And it really doesn't involve a lot of construction. It involves a door. Tom Makowicki would need a wall with a window in the fire marshal's office, and maybe putting a window in the fire marshal's new office, and maybe a few other things, not big. Maybe the capital improvements might be 20 grand, which the towns would all contribute to. So I think if it works for the judge, it's a win-win for the town. And we keep our costs ridiculously low to have the probate court be in the town of Old Saybrook still. And the judge also has security needs, according to the probate court administrator, that are met by her being self-contained. Right now, she crosses the public hallway to go into her courtroom. She wouldn't do that anymore. So there are security issues there too. And then there'd be 2 doors available to, one to the current conference room and one to what is now the building office. So there's 2 ways of egress and ingress, and it could work. If it works for her, this space, then it works for us. So I think that's I'm very happy. I think the other towns are going to be very happy. And I talked to the town administrator in Clinton. She's like, I'd much rather invest in your building than having to pay rent for the next 50 years. So, yeah, working on that. Had a meeting last Friday with Norm Needleman and the other 12 towns that are part of the Essex transfer station to discuss municipal solid waste and what we are doing now that NERA is dissolving. work in progress. I don't have I'd bore you if I gave you an update, so I'm not going to go into too much detail on that. We I did put out a bid. We have a pretty good offer as to where to take our MSW. Senator Needleman is trying to keep the towns together, to keep the Essex Transfer Station as an option for local waste processing. We'll see what the price is. If the price is competitive, we'll stay. If it's not, there's a good chance we'll go with one of the low bids, but TBD on that.
Where are the other bid, in other words, you'd have to bring the stuff, instead of Essex, you'd bring it elsewhere?
One option is to Deep River, one option is to New London, one option is to Middletown, but I basically ruled out Middletown because I don't think we should have a guy on the road that much time. There is an option in Deep River though.
Yeah, so you're looking at more travel time and wear and tear on the trucks?
Well, if it goes to Deep River, it won't be much more.
Isn't that down all the way down, what is it, exit 5? No, exit
We go to exit 4 now.
4, yeah, you go to exit 5 and then you take a left, go all the way in, take a right,
I think so,
down
yeah.
on the left, up on the
Yeah.
highway.
Yeah. That, we'll look at that. I gotta talk to Bill about it.
I'd say it's twice as far.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I know where it is. I haven't driven it in a long time, so
It's 20 minutes,
20 minutes isn't too bad.
10 minutes.
So, anyway, and the crosswalks on Main Street have finally been submitted. We went back and forth with the state 5 times. Submitted comments, submitted comments, submitted with the review, with the new comments, and they changed the comments. And Jeff Jacobson, we finally got on a call with the state, and I said, I need to be on that call. And they admitted, they were like, we're sorry. We have a new engineer who just came on and blah, blah, blah. So they kind of gave us a little bit of the runner. They're submitted. They should be approved. That should be out to bid next week, I hope. And that, I want the work done. Bill is hoping to do more sidewalk work with, to get all the sidewalks that need to be fixed. Pave the parking spaces. This is something that money was set aside over the course of 2 years. And then do the crosswalks. Hopefully, maybe by Memorial Day, July, that would be nice.
Yeah, great.
So that's the idea. That's all I have. And I'm sure there's more.
I'm sure there is. Any questions, Carl? All right. Any liaisons report? Comments from board members? None, public comment. We have 2 members of the public. Would either of you like to speak? If so, please raise your hand. No hands raised. We will continue to move. Comments from the chair. Only, again, reminder, see you 8:30 Saturday morning.
What do you guys want? We'll pick something up.
Just go get coffee and like you did last year, and I'll meet you here at 8 o'clock.
Wait, coffee, I'll bring bagels and muffins.
Bagels,
Anybody?
muffins,
That's fine.
yeah, cream cheese.
Sounds like breakfast. Sounds good.
You're good? Okay.
Nice.
I'm good. I tend to eat my own
All right.
food.
Motion to
George,
adjourn.
bring your apple.
So moved.
Second.